plenaries within the main hall. The key words for the session number 4 being collaboration. Secondly, latest updates on Tanzania's projects and global markets overview. Short-term supply and demand in Tanzania. I think you can follow this in the program. If there are any changes, I'll make a note. Oh, good stuff. I think we're ready. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get underway. Are we good? Your Excellency, Mohammed Sahu Al-Swaidi, Managing Director, Dotsal Hydrocarbons, as introduced. Let's put our hands together and let's welcome you to speech. I know you're a man of great humor, and I'm sure you'll spruce up our morning with the very first sentence you say, I truly believe that.
Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I wake up every morning with a big dose of caffeine. So I hope my speech this morning will be the caffeine that for those who are addicted to caffeine. Obviously, in Ramadan, holy month of Ramadan, I do struggle like smokers without caffeine, but that's my problem. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to stand up here and introduce the second day by going through why are we here again, what have we learned the first day, and what do you expect today and the rest of tomorrow. To start with, I would like to say we were, all of us, honored to have the government strong representative with the honorable ministers that were all sitting here. I think that gives the right message to us in the oil and gas industry, that the government is serious, the government of Tanzania wants to learn from others, and we had colleagues from African countries, neighbors, that Tanzania would like to learn from them and benefit from the journey in discovering oil and gas and moving forward. So our appreciation on behalf of all of you, I'd like to appreciate the honorable ministers who were sitting here and were with us almost a full day to support and give the right message to us investors and key stakeholders. I'd like to start as well by appreciating the collaboration of preparing and organizing this Oil and Gas Congress. In the region, I must say this is the strongest in my books as a Congress that brings in people. Until yesterday, there were almost 700 candidates registered and paid so far, and this is moving from the 400 that was quoted of last year. So that is a big percentage increase. I'd like to appreciate the collaboration of the Ocean Business Partner and CWC in organizing this event. I'd like to give a big hand to Honorary Abdul Samad. Please stand up.
The reason why we have less people is because I heard people had a very good time and they will be joining us, bar their headaches. So thank you to the BHC for that. Some of the messaging, as just discussed yesterday, was that dialogue and engagement is particularly important with the government. So you'll see from the panel here today, we have industry, we have the national oil companies, and most importantly as well, we have the Tanzanian government represented to discuss what we think are the challenges and opportunities in this area. So this is a very interesting area. Most interesting for me, most of our panelists are economists. And I think that's really important when driving change in any industry. As a lawyer, when I go to a discussion on changing the law, I see a lot of academics and a lot of lawyers sitting there. But the real drivers for economic change, because as is recognized by our government, economic change is driven by the private sector industry, including the oil and gas industry. And only economists can really judge the impact on the changes that we make. So I'm very excited to have so many economists on the panel today. Some of the things that we've also touched on and we'll touch on today when talking about industry collaboration is where our gas goes. So I think some of the things that were discussed yesterday, there was a push from the Honourable Minister for Energy to have more households on our gas pipelines. In Tanzania, gas produces 45% of the capacity on the on-grid electricity. And we have plans to basically increase our capacity 5 times by 2020, and then essentially 10 times by 2025. So this is very exciting in terms of opportunity on the electricity side, from gas to electricity, including through our Kinyarezi belt. We're on Kinyarezi stage 2, and we're going to go to stage 3 and stage 4 very shortly. So gas is hugely important to our economy, but it's also important from an export perspective. So today, we have representatives from Mozambique, for example, who can talk about their LNG plant, but it's a huge future area for us. When we break down the topic into the basics, I think we'll probably touch on the topics because we are running a little bit behind time. But I think things to keep in mind when you're talking about this is how power, so electricity, is being generated from what we discuss. Thinking about the EACOP in the context of what we're discussing, and thinking about infrastructure in particular. And Tanzania is very famous on record at the moment, particularly after our SADC taking the chairmanship of SADC, some of the discussions that were had. But we have a huge amount of infrastructure projects on the table, including on the mining side, new standard gauge railways to take minerals across, which we can extend across to the oil and gas side for things like LPG, where we're now doing bulk procurement. We also have a huge amount happening on the roads and infrastructure in general, hopefully to support our gas and then future oil boom. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. That is the Honourable Dr. Hamisi Mwinyi Mvuma, the Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Energy in Tanzania. The doctor became the Permanent Secretary in 2017, but he is actually an economist by background, again, with a BA, MA and PhD from the University of Dar es Salaam and Lund University of Sweden. He was also an assistant lecturer, and senior lecturer in the University of Dar es Salaam. So he's very well known, very respected on the academic side, as well as his civil service role. In the past, he's been in civil service since 2006, where he moved from the university, and he was actually the former president, Kikwete's personal advisor on economic affairs, as well as previously the Deputy Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Finance, and previously the Permanent Secretary in the Prime Minister's Office. Doctor, I'd like to ask you to please come up and make your presentation.
This one is not true. It should be easier here.
Shall I turn this round?
Thank you, moderator. Good morning, everybody. Since I'm speaking for the first time before this audience, let me take this opportunity to invite you to our Congress. It started yesterday, and I hope you enjoyed. And we also enjoyed. We're continuing to learn from different experiences, and would like also to share our experiences. My presentation is on industry collaboration for successful oil and gas projects. The presentation is technology challenge. Okay, it's divided into several parts, depending on actually following the guide that we were given to speak about all these issues. Okay, let me start by saying that we derive our policy direction from energy policy of 2015. It guides us to optimize benefits accruing from Tanzania's participation in the regional and international energy projects, that Tanzania should be ready to participate in the regional and international projects. We should also facilitate cross-border power trading and support interconnection with neighboring countries. In our case, definitely we are not working in isolation. We already have projects that are collaborative in nature, and would encourage collaboration in areas of joint exploration and development of resources, infrastructure development, including refinery processing plants, storage facilities, transmission and distribution pipelines, and other projects like LNG and compressed natural gas. Would also like to collaborate on regional cross-border projects such as power generation projects that are cater for more than one country. We have examples of Rusumo, where we are sharing with Rwanda and Uganda. We are planning other projects along Kagera River on the same arrangements. We are also ready to collaborate in areas of other areas of industrial development, like petrochemicals, gas to liquid, etc. We are very mindful also, in doing so, to ensure that we actually maximize local content. We have regulations that guide. I think investors know about those regulations that ensure that nationals participate in various projects. We know that most of these huge projects are foreign direct investments, but we would like to see that our people also participate to achieve not only get output, get revenues, but also ensure that our people are employed, they get skills, and so on. As I said, our legal framework requires us to ensure that we maximize local content. On the issue of Tanzania as a regional hub for power and energy distribution, I think we all know that strategically Tanzania is located to serve many countries that are bordering our country. We have resources that can be shared, both in terms of power and, of course, for the time being, gas. Currently, we have enough power and a small surplus to be able to share with our neighbors. But we have projects that are undergoing that will definitely serve for other countries. So we are positioned to sell excess power to regional markets. We are, as I said, we have various projects that are completed and ongoing, but suffices just to, for the sake of time, I won't mention the projects. But there are projects that we are planning ahead, like Kinyerezi 3, which is 600 megawatts, Kinyerezi 4, 450 megawatts, Mtwara power generation, 300 megawatts, Somangafungu power generation, 330, and of course, the Rufiji hydropower project, which will generate 2,115 megawatts. Definitely, this will lead us to have excess power, and we're ready to share with our neighbors. We are members of the East African Power Pool, and also members of the South African Power Pool. That should have been SAPP. So this shows that we are ready to collaborate, and we invite our neighbors also to be ready to work with us. We have started. Most of them are members of the power pools that I mentioned. On the part of oil and gas, we currently have a pipeline with Zambia, which transports crude oil, but we are planning another pipeline which will be for white products. We are actually in the stage of doing feasibility study. We have a request from Uganda for gas, and we have signed a memorandum of understanding. And very soon we'll also start feasibility study. We have a request from Kenya for gas to do a pipeline from, of course, Dar es Salaam, Tanga to Mombasa. And we're also planning to collaborate with Uganda in the implementation of ECOP projects with a pipeline running from Hoima in Uganda to Tanga in Tanzania. This is a crude oil pipeline. We have a request from Rwanda and Burundi. And as I said, the new Tazama pipeline. So the demand is there. The question is implementation to ensure that really collaboration that we're talking about happens. On the issue of future partnerships and sharing facilities for the oil and gas projects in the region, I think what we are saying here is that okay. That we should strive to ensure that we actually ensure partnerships in implementation of various projects. It's not proper to have duplications. It's better to share some of the facilities that involve a lot of investments. And in fact, actually sharing facilities will make sure that we evacuate whatever resources or extra energies that we have in our countries. I would just give an example of the facilities that we have in Tanzania. In the case of processing plants, we have Madimba processing plant and Songo Songo processing plants. We have also Somangafungu, which is a natural gathering station. And then we have a pipeline that runs from Mtwara to Dar es Salaam. I won't go into details. I think the next presentations in the next session will go into details of these projects. We have also Songo pipeline, Songas pipeline. All these are transporting gas, and from Dar es Salaam, as I said, we can actually connect to other countries like Uganda and Kenya. On the infrastructure development opportunities in Tanzania, as I said, we have strategic infrastructure projects that can ensure security of supply. And in this case, would like also to ensure that we continue to build critical infrastructures to other areas. For example, we have gas along the coast, but we would like to take this gas to other regions, apart from neighboring countries, but also other regions within the country. So we are striving to ensure that we construct facilities for example, CNG and micro or mini LNG, if possible. We're still working on the feasibilities to ensure that, to see what it takes to supply gas to other areas in Tanzania. Within the natural gas utilization master plan, that's where we are guided to ensure that we actually supply gas to other areas of the country and, of course, to our neighbors. On the part of power, we have what we call Power System Master Plan, which provides for electricity generation using a mix of resources that we have, like hydro, gas, wind, solar, ocean waves, etc. But all this, to be shared, will need to actually put in place infrastructures. We also need to link various modes of transportation when transporting our resources. For example, as I said, taking gas to other regions within the country, it will be very expensive to build pipelines. But probably other means like CNG and mini LNG can be transported using vehicles or railway. These are areas that we are investing heavily currently. Again, I talked about the ECOP pipeline. There are opportunities here to actually extend it to other areas where in future probably oil will be discovered. For example, from Uganda to Congo, from Tanzania to Rwanda and Burundi, and so on. These are opportunities that we see them coming as explorations continue. The Tazama pipeline has a way lift that can transport gas or petroleum products to Zambia, Malawi, and the other countries. Of course, I talked about Mombasa and also, and of course, in the case of power distribution, I talked about EAPP and SAPP, and I won't repeat those. Those are definitely opportunities that are available in the future. I think this, well, the ECO project is strategic importance, as I mentioned earlier. It will accommodate future discoveries, not only in Uganda, but other countries that are bordering Tanzania. It will create jobs for Tanzanians and Ugandans and other people, 10,000 jobs during construction, and about 1,000 jobs during operation. It will also create forward and backward linkages to other sectors that will be supplying various goods and services. It will also ensure generate revenue to two governments, Uganda and Tanzania, and again, the way live will open opportunities to put in place other pipelines. I think in the interest of time, I'll skip this part, which talks about how can the planned infrastructure enhance project efficiency. We say that, of course, it depends on how we deliver, the speed at which we deliver the projects, contracts, regulations, and the other issues. I talked about the linkage between roads, and railways, that they complement each other when it comes to transportation of resources like gas to other parts of the country. And what does that mean? It means that we need actually to ensure that we invest enough resources in ensuring that our roads and railway systems are passable throughout the year. Let me conclude now by saying that sharing of the infrastructure in the region will enhance regional integration and cooperation and speed the socio-economic development of the region. I think this is a fact, even to those who are not economists, but definitely the sharing of infrastructure will ease transportation and processing of various resources. And lastly, let me say that Tanzania invites potential investors to come and join us in ensuring that we foster this regional integration through infrastructure development in the petroleum and other energy sectors, including power. Lastly, I thank you all for listening, and I'm ready to clarify anything when time comes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hamisi Munyimvuma, Permanent Secretary for Ministry of Energy of Tanzania. I have to stop saying that. So can I just actually ask for an extra round of applause, because that presentation exactly covered every single area in the program, and it's very rare to see that. And I can tell, Doctor, that you were a university lecturer, because I learned a huge amount. So can we just have an extra round of applause for doing that? It was definitely not off the shelf. It was a very tailored presentation. And just to add on to some of the things you were saying, but when we talk about the Tanzania as a regional power hub, there are plans right now with our electricity, and as was said, we're moving on to have Stigler's Gorge, an extra 2,000 megawatts of electricity. We're going to have a transmission line between Zambia, Tanzania, and Kenya anytime soon. So we're really sitting in a place where we can maximize from that with our gas projects. And even on the Zanzibar side, Zanzibar right now is almost 100% reliant on electricity from mainland Tanzania through subsea cabling. So really, if gas, and it was said to be 57% of our electricity capacity there is through gas, then investing in Tanzania's gas is a good place to go, because you will definitely have an off-taker in terms of electricity on country, as well as our LNG and other plans off country. So for presentation 2, we're very, very excited to have Mr. Omar Mitar, the Chairman and CEO of ENH. ENH, I could say this in Portuguese, but it wouldn't be very well said, is the national oil company of Mozambique. Mr. Mitai also has a degree in economics, makes him one of my good friends, and a postgraduate degree in management. Formerly, he was the chief economist and investment banking manager at Millennium International Bank of Mozambique, which many people know as BIM, which was the #1 bank in Mozambique, both by asset value and market share. He was also formerly deputy minister of the Ministry of Industry and Trade of Mozambique. And from August 2015, he's been in his current role as chairman and CEO of ENH. Now, everybody is very excited about Mozambique, I know. They have an estimated 125 trillion cubic feet of technically recoverable gas. People are always hearing about their 3 LNG plants that are in the mix, and the fact that FID was achieved just about a month ago on one. I think in terms of, and I'm sure we'll hear from the Honourable Speaker, where we can learn in Tanzania from that example. But if you look in the news, every day there's a new story about Mozambique. And I understand recently, on the 7th of September, there was also a launch of ENH Energy Trading, which is a venture commodity trading company. So the National Oil Company is now also looking at trading and diversification, which is also really important to kind of hedge against future risk. So without further ado, I would please ask our Honourable Speaker to come up and present to us. Thank you. With a round of applause, please.
Good morning, everybody. Mozambique, the national company represents the commercial interests of the state, with the regulator, which is the National Petroleum Institute, INP, and then the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Mineral Resources and Energy. As from July this year, a new law of state-owned enterprise has been approved by the Council of Ministers, in which case an institute which manages all the stakes from the state will supervise all the state-owned enterprises. Railway company, the airliner, ENH, you mentioned it, the power utility company, all of those will be under the remit of Egypt. ENH usually participates in every block by default, ranging between 10 to 30% of stake as part of the concession agreement between the government and the IOCs. Also, ENH has been appointed as aggregator for domestic gas, and by law, 25% of all the hydrocarbons produced in Mozambique will have to be allocated to the domestic market. In terms of our play, I think that the major play is the world-class reserve we have in the Rovuma Basin. We've got Mozambique Basin with 10 TCF, and then we'll launch the fifth round. The fifth round was also very attractive because we had other players, the likes of Rosneft, which includes BP as well, and Exxon again, and ENI again, and Sasol again. So Angoshi, which is in the southern part of Rovuma, just there with the green painting, there should be an oil seep, and exploration and drilling will start next year, Q1 2020, when drilling for the floating LNG will start this year. So we'll see a lot of activity. In the Mozambican Basin, in the southern part of Mozambique, we have a play of an estimate of 5 TCF, where Sasol is the operator, with an integrated project from upstream CPF and an 850-kilometer pipeline connecting Mozambique to Gauteng province in South Africa, where most of the gas produced is being exported to South Africa, and only 36 million gigajoules per annum are being sold within the country, in which case 9 million gigajoules are part of the royalty gas. Now, what's happening today from Sasol project is that most of this is being exported. At the beginning, it was necessary to underpin project financing. So we had to have an off-taker that had a good investment grade and that was bankable as well. So export orientation was the main model. And some years later, we went into the domestic market to supply gas for power. Now, 1/3 of the power supply in Mozambique is generated by gas. We opened a new CTM gas turbine plant in Maputo some last year, and it's 1/3. There will be another one of 400 megawatts, but now the studies are still, the implementation will take time because that was mandatory by the government that the project had to supply 400 megawatts. ENH also has created 2 joint venture companies, one with Kogas, the South Korean company, in which case we have a concession to distribute in Maputo and in outskirts of Maputo. So we have a number of customers there, not that big yet. And also Matola Gas Company, which caters to the market segment in the industrial zone of Matola, just some kilometers away from Maputo city. So it's still a small play, less than 5 TCF since 2004. We have gas supply agreements in place. The reserves, they've attained the plateau already, and we're now looking at ways to improve the performance of those reserves. Otherwise, we are going to be into depletion. Well, what messages would I bring to Tanzania as far as LNG is concerned to fast-track investments? Number one, I would say that these are large-scale investments where it was necessary to spend multi-billion dollars in exploration. So in order for you to make this feasible and bring an investment case, it has to be export-oriented. And these markets are far away, the premium markets, Japan, South Korea, and China. So it has to be with LNG, not with pipelines. And the reason behind is because the domestic market is very small, and you have always a conundrum that those in the domestic market cannot afford to pay. They cannot absorb 100% of the volumes. Neither can they undertake a take-or-pay clause in the gas supply agreement. So the best model would be first things first, the anchor project is export, and then you will look at the domestic market to monetize those resources. Otherwise, you are not going to be able to pay back or bring an investment case for the IOCs and also improve your project funding. The legal framework is extremely important. That should be conducive to project funding, to allow the IOCs to create SPVs, including commercial structures with borrowers and sellers that could be located abroad, either for tax purposes or to facilitate project funding, where the escrow account should be in offshore with all the covenants that are applied, as well as the wider stakeholder should be involved as well for the resettlement. It's extremely important in the location where these projects are going to take place that we involve the community, we involve the leaders from the very onset to understand about their needs, their requirement, their culture, and we socialize with them. For example, in order to bring credibility for the project, even before FID, the players in Rovuma Basin, they made a decision to build a resettlement village. Those pre-FID investments were also intended to showcase to the buyers in 2015 and 2016 when the market was very weak. And Anadarko had no track record in developing LNG projects worldwide, so maybe there was no credibility for them. ENI was so much focused on the floating LNG, not on the onshore project by that time, so that helped also. I have to rush, I have just 2 minutes. The high-level champions, you need high-level champions because it's very complex. You have to deal with land, marine concessions, landing strip, and other issues. So you have to have the Prime Minister or the President himself holding forums at least once a month to discuss critical issues that are in the critical path schedule so that the project is not delayed, and those are removed. You have to avoid duplication of infrastructures because Area 1 and Area 4 are almost together. So don't allow those projects to build infrastructure like marine concessions, a landing strip. No, there should be just one. so that there's no duplication of capex and cost oil is reduced. Dome gas, it has to be correlated with the development of the LNG project, but those are the anchor projects. We have to manage properly the expectations. We have to push for majors to come into the country by improving also the environment, and to push for the local content through the plan of development so that it is approved ab initio within the plan of development itself, and let the market dictate gradually how this is going to happen instead of dictating rules from the very beginning that will undermine project cost and might shy away those investments at all. Localize the infrastructures. The oil and gas service center in Pemba, for example, it was mandatory that all the oil and gas companies should service from there. And this belongs to two state-owned enterprises. We did the sub-concession on the private enterprise. So that's a way to capture also revenues for the country and localize. The intention is that 20% of that stake will go for an IPO, initial public offer, so that there is a legitimate inclusion of the Mozambican population. So logistics is another way which the national company could play so that they can be on board. Well, this is Area 1. I think that most people know it. It's 2 trains, 12.6 million tons per annum. Anadarko is no longer the player. Total has farmed in. So Total is taking over, has taken over already as from last week. 12.6 million tons per annum. The floating LNG is under construction, 50% already built in South Korea. Another is 15.6. So we sum to 30 million tons per annum of LNG starting within 5 years' time. Mozambique could become one of the largest LNG provinces in the world after Qatar and others. Of course, there's gas for domestic allocation that has been decided. The questions are, how is pricing and the margins for capital-intensive projects? How is the timing and coordination in terms of synergies? And also, is this domestic gas for domestic market or for re-export after value addition? Of course, you have arguments that have to do with policy, economic policy, because all we want in most countries in Africa is that we change the paradigm of the north-south divide, in which case we think that we have inherited from our colonial masters economies where we export primary products and we don't have value addition. And there's the issue of the terms of exchange. But we have to make sure that whatever comes into the domestic market, there is an investment case so that the price is not subsidized. It has to be an arm's length transaction. And then also the argument is that we have to add value to reduce regional asymmetries, but at the same time, is export a bad thing? It's not a bad thing at all, because you can get gains from royalty fees, profit oil, and income tax. As long as you beef up the revenue for the government, the central government, then it's up to the government to allocate those resources to build infrastructures, education. After all, the questions are, what are we doing for the next generation if we deplete the resources today? So the government is there in charge. After all, we say, how can we avoid the resource cost issue in Africa, in which case we ignore the other sectors like agriculture, industry, tourism in favor of oil and gas. So by having the revenues, we can build the infrastructure and prepare better the economy so that it's widely diversified. I will end up there because my 10 minutes have been exhausted. I'll be willing to take your questions thereafter. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Matar. I think the other lesson you can get from that is national oil companies should be headed by economists and bankers. That was amazing. That was really, really good. And if you listen to the dialogue there, it was really about win-win and give and take. We'll cover off in the Q&A more of what Mozambique has done, including with its enabling law. But it's a very important point to emphasize that it has to be give and take, and you have to anchor it from export, because that's where the real money will eventually come into the country. And you have to give an investment climate that is appropriate and stable enough for people to put in the billions that are needed for large-scale oil and gas projects. The other very interesting point that came out was this point about the economy growing, so it's no longer reliant on gas as a result of the money that comes in from gas. So if you look at UAE as an example, having so much oil, but then when we talk about going to Dubai today, for me, it's all about the shopping, and it's all about the Burj Khalifa, and it's all about the industry there. It's about the tax-friendly areas where businesses are now headquartering themselves in Dubai instead of the Channel Islands, instead of Mauritius, etc. You know, it's very important that we also live that story. And even if you look at England as an economy, it stopped having a national oil company. It privatized everything and said, well, we're going to make lots of money from tax, because then people have, you don't charge the gambler to enter the casino, but you have a win-win situation when it's tax heavy on the product that comes out and the profit oil, etc. So I think I'm going to now introduce our third speaker. This is very exciting, one of our Ugandan brothers. I'm inviting Francis, and I'm going to do it properly this time, Twina Matsiko, who's a board member of the Ugandan National Oil Company, or UNOC. UNOC was created in 2015. Francis himself, again, has 17 years of experience in public finance management, including, amongst others, tax policy and administration, macroeconomic management, project finance, structuring trade policy, and regional integration. He's currently actually Assistant Commissioner for Tax Policy for the Tax Policy Department at the Ugandan Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. He's going to give you a presentation today entitled Opportunities for Collaboration and Local Content Development Across the Region, with particular focus on Uganda. I'm sure we're very excited to hear about Uganda and the EACOP as well.
Thank you very much. I'm going to present this paper on behalf of the chairman, Emmanuel Katongole, of Uganda National Oil Company. He was unable to be here because of some other engagements. I would also like to introduce my other directors of National Oil Company who are here. One is Engineer Irene Batebe. I don't know whether she's around. I think she represented the minister yesterday. Maybe she went back. The other one is Honorable Grace Tubita. Honorable Grace Tubita. And then we have our manager, board affairs, Uganda National Oil Company. If you have any questions that I may not answer, any of us basically can answer the questions. Yeah. Sorry about that. It goes back. Uganda National Oil Company basically is a young company. It was incorporated in 2015. In 2015.
Ladies and gentlemen, this instrument should be pointed towards the remotes, at the back there. And so you will see it move this way rather than towards the screen. I'm sorry to disturb you.
Can you go back? It is owned by the government with Minister of Energy, 51%, and Minister of Finance, 49%. It has a board, and the Uganda National Oil Company has two subsidiaries. One is the Uganda Refinery Holding Company Limited, and the other one is the National Pipeline Company of Uganda. Uganda National Oil Company operates along the the whole petroleum value chain, including licensing, exploration, development and production. That's on the upstream side. For midstream, you have transportation, refining, and the gas processing. That's where we are going to have the refinery, industrial park, and then the crude oil pipeline, where Uganda is going to own 15%. Then on downstream, will do distribution, marketing, and sales. You note that distinguished delegates, the development of oil and gas presents an opportunity for the East African region. There are discoveries in Kenya, discoveries in Uganda, and you see a huge potential of gas in Tanzania. They present basically the opportunity for the East African economies to grow if we utilize these resources very well. And if we utilize also collaborative engagements and partnership with the investors. There are many opportunities for commercializing oil and gas. This is actually the forward. Can you go back? Back. Yeah. Next. Yeah. Okay. You know that there are many opportunities for commercializing oil and gas projects in Uganda, and to develop the Tilenga and Kingfisher Central Processing Facility. We have to develop around 200 kilometers of in-field floors, lines, 150 kilometers, and around 400 wells have to be constructed and completed, drilled and completed. We have to construct a pipeline, which is 1,443. There is a mistake here. I think we need to correct it. It is a heated pipeline all the way from Hoima to Tanga. And then the development of a 60,000 barrels per day of the refinery, and then the other support infrastructure. All these projects present opportunities, and given that UNOC is going to be partnering, then we need the partners to assist develop these projects. This one basically gives the details of the project I have already highlighted, clearly illustrating who is playing what role. So I don't want to dwell on this much. This one is the Kabale Industrial Park, which is basically going to be developed by Uganda National Oil Company, and it presents enormous opportunities. Opportunities ranging from the refinery is going to be there. You are going to have fertilizer industries, petrochemical industries. You are going to have industrial gases industries, agro-processing industries, and metal fabrication. Then warehousing and logistics. All these are industries, and they present opportunities in this industrial park. There is also automatically need for accommodation in this industrial park. This is a Kampala storage terminal, which also basically presents opportunities, and UNOC is going to develop it. We are trying to procure a partner to develop this project together. These are the other opportunities, and from this you note that there are specialized services, direct services, and induced services. Specialized services, automatically, you note that we may not have the capacity to do them, even in direct services. So this is basically where we need to collaborate and make sure we get investors to partner with to do most of these services. Around 16 services, goods and services have been identified and manifest for Uganda. And the only question is that Ugandans must meet the standards. They must meet the quantity, they must be able to supply quality, and they must provide goods and services at a competitive price. But as you note, some of these areas, automatically we still have challenges. Oil companies, international oil companies, did a study in 2013-14, and you note that there are serious gaps. There are serious quantity gaps and the standard gaps for industries like transportation and logistics. You look at the waste management, check safety and the production operations. There are serious quantity, both quantity and low standards. So those are industries where we need basically collaboration. We also identified the manpower requirements, and you note that at each level, you note there are a number of manpower requirements, and automatically we don't have the capacity. So given that there is no capacity, automatically we need to collaborate at both regional level and in multinational companies and oil and gas companies to make sure that we provide this manpower requirement. This is the progress of local content. Currently, on this table, what is lacking is UNOC. UNOC employs currently around 104 employees, and they are all Ugandans. So basically, this is where we are. And you may note that percentage of Ugandan nationals, you know that around 75 for, that is Total, Sinok, and then Taro. This is a progress. You note that from this graph, around 69% of contracts, which is around 24.8 million, were contracts signed with Ugandan companies. In those areas, legal services, freight and forwarding, water, and catering services. And from the contract, you know, those two graphs give both cumulative and the annual contract value spent on local companies in $1 million. The next slide, I don't know why it is not moving. The next slide basically, it also gives the progress, but it is on supplier development. And what is important basically here to note is that there is a national supplier database. For investors who are going to be joint partners, you need to register on Petroleum Authority of Uganda for this national supplier database because it is a requirement. If you want to participate in any procurement of goods and services in the sector, then you need to register on national supplier database. At the regional level, I think there is a challenge, and basically we need to do harmonization because there is a challenge of of instance, the definition of a citizen, even at EAC level. So we need to agree, harmonize local content rules to make sure that we benefit from oil and gas sector. In conclusion, I think the oil and gas sector presents many opportunities, both in the upstream, midstream, and downstream, which should be exploited by investors. I think we need to harmonize local content policy at regional level to make sure that we benefit and collaborate. And we need to do continuous capacity building for both the public and small and medium enterprises to ensure that they exploit the value from the sector. We also need to establish centers of excellence, basically to build capacity, train East Africans on oil and gas, and then we need to establish a fund to support small and medium enterprises to ensure that we also support local content. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Francis Twina Matsiko. Was that right? Great, okay, I got it that time. That was a very, very enlightening presentation. It was very easy to watch. And I think actually very easy to watch is something you could say about Uganda generally in terms of the way that we have been watching them. It just seems so easy, so well organized on the oil and gas space. They're a great regional success story. I think as neighbors, very, very friendly. All stories that we've heard in terms of the integration, particularly on the EACOP, has just been wonderful, wonderful stories about how well UNOC and EACOP have been doing. I think it's just on the capacity, I would just add that every Ugandan lawyer I've met has been very good. So I do a plug for that. One of the interesting things I think that was said today was the point about EAC local content. So we've heard a lot about local content. In itself, local content is protectionist. It's about the country itself and protecting citizens of the relevant country. So all of our, across Africa, local content laws talk about our citizens. And actually, local content is against regional integration if you look at citizenship of the country. But the great thing that EACOP was working on doing was bringing forward local content norms to satisfy. So if you satisfy in Uganda or you satisfy in Tanzania, you satisfy in both. And I think that's really important. Tanzania is currently heading SADC. We've got the chairmanship for the year, and we had all the SADC meetings here. And one of the things that was said is, well, why don't we make local content rules in each country to do with SADC region members or EAC region members, or even African Free Continental Trade region members, so the whole of Africa. So it's a very important point. So now we get to hear from industry per se. So I would next like to introduce Michael Not, who's the Business Development Manager at Industrial Maintenance International Limited, better known as IMI. He's joining us today from Tunisia. Michael is actually a mechanical engineer who's worked in the oil and gas industry for more than 30 years, although he doesn't look it. He's formerly worked currently at IMI, formerly at Wood Group, PSN, and Acre Solutions. He also formerly held the VP positions in business development and managing director of 2 Algerian companies before moving to IMI. IMI is one of our sponsors and is also one of the world's leading companies in the oil and gas recruitment services, technical services provision. It's one of Tunisia's largest construction technical assistance companies, and it has 22 offices worldwide, but he will correct me if that's wrong. So Michael today is going to talk to us today about what IMI does internationally, including its products and lessons from other countries that can be learned for Tanzania. So can we have a big round of applause for Michael, please?
Morning, everyone. It's actually Michelle, but that's all right. I'm here tonight I'm here to present IMI and what we do and what we intend to do in East Africa. We're a provider, we support EPC contractors and owners around the globe for construction, operation, oil and gas facilities. We have a large recruiting, testing, training facility in Manila from where we mobilize engineers, craft personnel to clients. We have current operations in 22 countries, primarily in Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and North America. But we are also a maintenance contractor for the oil and gas industry. Where am I? Sorry, I went too far. Our stated mission is reflected here. Our goal is to create hope and opportunity for unskilled and skilled workforces through training and to leave a lasting legacy of economic value and benefit in the region we serve. We endeavor to meet the challenges of our clients, provide opportunities for growth and security of our employees, continuously improve our culture and safety, and never compromise ethics in business and welfare. Now, our plan for East Africa is to duplicate the recruiting process, training, and assessment capabilities and performance of certification of workers that we have done in Manila. Our East African facilities will employ local and regional talent with oversight from IMI management. We have engaged with a number of partners in the region, allowing greater breadth of services and opportunities for workers. A key cornerstone of our enterprise in East Africa will be establishing and promoting a culture of health, safety, and environment 24/7. We will establish a facility with welding booth to train and test for applicable projects, materials, and welding techniques, as well as pipe fitting. Illustrated here is a menu of the training and testing courses IMI has developed that will be applicable in East Africa for years to come. IMI's process of training and worker development begins with re-evaluation and moves along the spectrum to enhance the worker's capabilities and skill level through testing and certification. We highlight safety, as it is an area that so much value can be realized with very little cost and effort. Training techniques on how to properly employ equipment, educate, and apply the method to safely address hazard. Make safe working conditions and practices everyone's responsibility. Empower the workers to stop an activity if he sees a potential hazard. Reward workers for actively engaging. At the end of the day, we want to see the workers go home to their families in good health and safely. We cannot stress enough all our obligations and responsibilities to HSE. It is no small investment to recruit, to train, to test, to mobilize the workforce. Let's all commit to making a small investment in time and PPE to preserve that investment in the worker. In summary, IMI takes HSE protocols and culture extremely seriously. Next few slides will provide an overview of IMI's reach and range of services. We are operating in primarily oil and gas locals around the world. IMI has an inventory of over 22,000 employees, with literally any craft and professional job type that may be needed in the industry. Briefly, we support the clients from pre-feed through startup of new construction, as well as shutdowns and turnarounds. IMI is now providing full spectrum O&M services, including predictive and preventive maintenance, spare parts inventory, and operation analysis to enhance performance. Perhaps the largest project IMI participates in Chad and Cameroon for ExxonMobil, was launched in early 2000s. And IMI remains engaged today in the operation and maintenance of this facility. The highlights include that we have over 2,200 workers mobilized, lodged, and we have compiled 20 million hours without lost time incidents. And in that project, we have 1,200 Chadians that we've trained that are working there. IMI manages all visa immigration documents as well as the workforce throughout the project. While the Chad project engaged IMI for primarily craft resources, IMI provides engineering, construction management personnel during construction through startup of the Bonny Island project in Nigeria. We have a long history with Bonny Island, supporting many of the 6 existing strains. And we are proud to represent the clients that we serve. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michelle. That was very enlightening. Also, so very interesting from a capacity building perspective. I think one very interesting point that you put up there is for 2,200 workers. I don't know how many were expats, but getting full on-site work permits, etc. For expats. It's a particularly tough area in every country, as it should be, because people want to create work for locals. When we have this regional integration that we're going to be pursuing, it should be easier. But it is, clearly a challenge to regional integration and to industrial growth in the oil and gas industry when you can't get the permits for the particular area. But I know in Tanzania we've done a lot towards that, and in fact we have a cheaper class of permit where you're a gas expert. And it's something that we're always pushing to improve for the mega projects. So do we need to stand up? Is everyone still awake? I think I have very engaging panel members. Do you need 1 minute to stand up? Once one person stands up, the rest will. It's a very, oh, thank you. This is a leader in the crowd. Okay, feel free to stand up for a second. Just stretch, move. I'm not going to make you say hi to your neighbor, but I could do, or do anything silly, I promise. So I need you to be excited for the next speaker, because I'm very excited for the next speaker, or for two reasons. Firstly, he's phenomenal and knows a lot. So this is Silas Olang from ATOGS and also Resource Governance. You can sit down now. I talk a while. But secondly, today is talking about industrial collaboration. And I don't think I've ever seen an example in Tanzania as good as ATOGS, in terms of industrial collaboration. This is an organization that created itself from the opportunities in market. So we knew about the LNG plant. When EACOP came along, we thought, well, look, there's so much local content rules. We need to mobilize ourselves across industry to be ready for this. So the members of ATOGS are caterers, are logistics companies, not necessarily oil and gas professionals. So it's probably the only association I know where it's completely cross-industry. It's not just manufacturing, it's not just oil and gas. So it's a phenomenal success story of industry collaboration. Now, Silas is a member of ATOG's Governing Council, so he's talking with that hat today. But he's also the Africa Director at Natural Resource Governance Institute, or NIRGI. And he's an economist, and you know how much I like economists, so you know you'll be happy with this presentation. Prior to joining NRGI, Mr. Olang's roles included high-level positions in international organizations like Oxfam International, the Netherlands Development Organization, or SNV, and the European Development Fund, working particularly on micro-projects. So again, he has a fund background. Also a lecturer, he lectured economics at Mzumbe University in Tanzania. And he's also previously headed the planning departments at various local government authorities across Tanzania. Finally, he engages in a lot of regional initiatives. He's quite a famous man, such as the African Mining Vision, and he's also co-author of the AMV, so African Mining Vision Domestication Manual, EU Africa Raw Material Initiative, and many other publications. Today, Silas is going to give you a presentation from ATOGS entitled Local Content, Opportunities and Challenges for Collaboration in the Region. If I could have a big round of applause for Silas.
Thank you very much, moderator. It's the first time I've heard lawyers not liking economists.
Oh, really?
The worst meeting I had attended was between the lawyers and economists in the room and arguing about illicit financial flows and whether this is a human rights issue or economic issue, leave alone that one. So thanks very much for this opportunity. It's always a pleasure to have an opportunity to speak with you. And I'll spend the next 9.5 minutes to talk about 3 things. So first of all, I'll touch lightly on the opportunities for collaboration in the oil and gas sector. I will also look into the challenges, actors in the sector, challenges, but also the role for business associations, which ATOGS is one of. So that is what I'm going to do in the next, and I'm not a technology savvy, but I think I will try to. Right. So in terms of local content, which was the focus, and is the focus of ATOGS, we all agree that actually the objective and the goal is to optimize economic benefits to the country, but also to the actors in the sector. That is the bottom line. So that is the basis for collaboration. So, but also in terms of boosting competitiveness. So collaboration is very useful in boosting competitiveness of the actors in the sector. And also, the skills and technology transfer is very, very important, and those are the basis for collaboration. But also, these are to be anchored in the national development agenda. So in case of Tanzania, we talk about, development vision 2025. Those should be anchored into that. So the opportunity for collaboration in the first place is the resource base. And when we look at the region right from Angola, Mozambique, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, South Sudan. There is a huge resource base that should be an opportunity for collaboration in the sector. However, this is only a necessary condition. It's not a sufficient condition. A sufficient condition is for this to happen and for the collaboration to be meaningful. These resources underground have to be developed and transformed into development on the ground. So that is where you see the meaningful collaboration. So is it necessary? You have to have a resource. If there wasn't a resource base, probably we wouldn't be here. So that is a bottom line. Now, experience and the study that on my different hat we did, you'd see a significant delays in developing these resources in the region. And that is partly is because of lack of effective collaboration in the process of transforming these resources into meaningful, oh, I should do this. Opportunity number 2 is the policy and the legal framework. This is another opportunity for collaboration. So the delays in many cases are because of lack of collaboration and participation in the making of the policy and the regulatory frameworks. That would address, the needs of each parties involved, regulatory authorities, operators, and local private sector. So that is a basis of very important to collaborate right from there so that actually going forward you create opportunity for every actor in the sector to benefit. So all the countries in the region, Tanzania, Uganda, have the local content policy and legal instruments in place. Oh. And the second opportunity is really the actors. There are actors in the sector who should collaborate. Either the suppliers, operators themselves, the IOCs and others. There is also training institutions when it comes to skills development is very important. But also the public sector coordination is important to create an environment for collaboration. The challenges mainly are information asymmetry. In order to have a meaningful collaboration, you need to have a fair level of information. So you actually collaborating from an informed position. When you have an asymmetry in the information, the collaboration becomes a bit challenged, and normally what comes out is lack of trust, because I do not have enough information and I think maybe my collaborator is shortchanging me. So it's very, very important to address the question of information asymmetry. Uncertainty and unstable legal and policy framework is also a bit of a challenge. And to address that challenge, as I said, collaborating in the process of making these policies and laws is critically important. Poor and fiscal infrastructure, the lack of skilled labor force, but also corruption, especially in the subcontracting, is becoming a challenge, sometimes undermining competencies and competitiveness of the actors. So like, if you have a company that has some competencies, but because of corruption, and we have to say it very boldly, collaboration doesn't happen very well. Sabrina mentioned this, local content vis-a-vis regional integration. There is a bit of a tension. All those laws that I mentioned about local content, each one talks about national, local, national, local. There is nothing about, okay, if there is nothing in the national jurisdiction, can we go a step ahead and say, in the region, East Africa, and even in the continent? So that one, I think there is a bit of a challenge. And then, so the key role for business associations like ATOX, first is to advocate for a robust and stable local content policy, legal and regulatory framework at national and, where possible, at continental level. And I think this is where the regional business associations is very, very important to address this question of, disstationary, I would call it a bit disstationary, country-specific vis-a-vis the regional integration. But also information broker in terms of bringing the information to the membership and other actors in the sector. So trying to broker the information to close the information asymmetry gap that I mentioned. Also to facilitate business linkages is very, very important, and ATOX have been very active in trying to bring its membership, create linkages between its members with other business opportunities in the region, including, organizing, business exchange visits, as well as building, bilateral relationships between membership and other in the region. I know I was just trying to provoke the discussion. 10 minutes would not be sufficient to go into the details, but I'll be happy to take your comments and questions for further clarification. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Silas, and also thank you for sticking to time. And accordingly, it's been suggested that we have less of a Q&A because we're quite behind time. I have some really burning questions for our panelists. And breaking the podium. So actually, I'm speaking in the financing section at 2 p.m. So I hope our panelists will be there. Oh, great. I hope our panelists will be there so I can also ask them questions instead of speaking in that session. To cut down on time then, potentially, can we just take 2 questions from the floor? Because I know you may have burning questions. Do you have burning questions? Do you just want tea? Are there coffee addicts here, as we heard earlier? No questions from the floor? Excellent. So with that, I'd like to say thank you so much to our panel members. I think that was a really instructive panel. There's a question from a very important person on the floor. We'll just have the one question, then we'll break for tea and coffee and cigarettes if you also smoke.
Thank you. I just wanted clarification from the speaker from Mozambique. I know that in Mozambique they have, as he has said, a lot of reserve and also proven reserve. He talked very little about domestic use of gas. Of course, there was a slide, but what he was saying is like, first of all, concentrate on.
But he did say that the law said 25% of all gas would have to be used for domestic use, which is huge.
Yeah, but what he was advising us is that we start first with exports so that we can get money and then use that money for diversification in other sectors of the economy. But also I'm aware that in any economy or in any country, development is geared by energy. If a country has no energy, it will not develop at all. Yeah, because that is why these countries, they need energy. You see countries like Japan, like Korea, they don't have gas, but they have invested a lot. Japan now has like maybe what Mozambique have, because they have reserved in, they have imported LNG and reserved it, and they are using it very efficiently. So I thought there was a necessary to balance because if you don't have energy, then you cannot develop. So if you just have money but don't have energy, you keep on importing expensive energy. I thought we need balancing. We start both projects. I just wanted clarification from him. Thank you very much.
So I don't know if you want to take that in terms of also the actual capacity that you need against the amount of gas that you can produce as well on the 25-75% split. Do you think there would be a risk of lack of domestic energy if you're saving 25%?
Thank you very much for the question. Well, I did not say that there is no need for dome gas. What I said was we have to exercise caution in the sense that how we phase out and prioritize these large-scale projects. As you should be aware, these are offshore, deep offshore discoveries, in which case multi-billion dollars have been spent for that. To monetize those, you need large-scale projects that will bring about economies of scale, not least because Qatar, the biggest exporter with a 30% market share, will ramp up production from 77 to 100 million tons per annum, let alone US, that has become an exporter, Egypt has become an exporter, Nigeria has expanded into brownfield project with another LNG plant, that's Angola as well is there. So there is, let alone Australia and Russia through the pipelines into China, Myanmar as well. So the market setting as of today says that you have to be quick to the timing, and you will not underpin LNG projects unless you have got off-takers. You will never say you have a project unless you have a buyer. And in order for you to have a buyer, you go through two ways. One way is to go through the traditional way, which is to underpin long-term commitments on a delivery ex-ship where you take account of the entire value chain. By today, the rules have changed. You have only aggregators, and the contracts are no longer that long-term. So you have to go into free on board. So what I'm trying to highlight here is that these massive reserves, they have to build an investment case where export credit agencies, financial institutions, the buyer will see that there is a construct that the entire project is well constructed to make an investment case to be convincing, because if the off-taker is a domestic company, that is the utility company, in which case the balance sheet is in bad shape. It has got areas in terms of payments. It is an underinvestment grade. It cannot take recourse to the government, which is also in a default position with a rating of CCC. So let's do first the export to anchor the projects, phase out, and then develop the domestic market. That's what we did with the onshore field also in Pand and Temane, because we had to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in the southern part of Mozambique. So we had to look for someone that could take off, and that was South Africa, which is a powerhouse in Southern Africa. So we can discuss that resources are going out. No, that's not the case. The resources we get in terms of money, I'm not saying we should develop the dome gas. It will come as a result of further monetization, because infrastructure will be there, and because the cash flows have been beefed up, then it's easy for the IOCs to say, yes, we can look at the issue of dome gas. And again, whenever people think about domestic gas, they think that it's free gas or cheaper gas, simply because we have the resources. It costs money. So it is either cost plus margin or net back pricing. In the case of Rovuma, the reserves are huge and plenty. So net back pricing doesn't hold. That would be cost of opportunity, because I know that in 40 years' time, those resources will not be depleted. They'll still be there. So it doesn't work out. We go to cost plus margin. It's a discussion. How much capex you want, because you must have also an investment and a final investment decision also, so that both the off-taker, whether it's Shell or Yara, and the IOCs put in place those investments. So the point I'm trying to highlight, let's phase out and see how we can, in conjunction, develop the LNG projects as well as the domestic market, bearing in mind that most African countries have smaller markets and face the conundrum of having the resources but not having a viable domestic market. It has to be phased out. That's the message I would like to pass.
Yes. Just to add on that, like Mozambique, you have a lot of reserve. I know that your project are anchor because you have a lot of reserve. They can return the money invested. But again, I was asking, why don't you also go for big domestic projects for economic diversification, like the petrochemicals and everything, go together hand in hand while you are developing LNG, also those projects, because you have a lot of reserve. You cannot tell me that this reserve, if you use it for those projects, can maybe make these other export projects not taking off, because that is why I was asking. Yeah.
If there is an investment case for a petrochem, it's okay. A petrochem is capital intensive. It hinges upon the margin between the feed gas price and the price of the liquids. If this works properly, then you've got an economic case. And who is the promoter? Is it a Mozambican company with a weak link to the government that is in default for its foreign debt? No, it can't be. It has to be an IOC with investment grade. Otherwise, it will not be bankable, because you can't invest 8 billion only in equity. Equity is very costly. These investors could go elsewhere in the world to invest their money. They could even buy treasury bonds from the US, which is risk-free rate. So we have to put in balance all these things. And with all due respect, we have also to take into consideration the competition. Maybe we're better off, even if we have the resources, import that liquid, because it's cheaper to bring from the Middle East, rather than cling to the idea that, you know, we've been colonized, we have to add value to our resources. If it's not feasible, that's it. We have to stop being led by emotions. We have to get rid of those emotions and look at the reality and put our foot on the ground and say, does this make economic sense or not? Otherwise, we will have white elephants that instead of helping the development, it will take the money out of the poor people to buy liquids that are more expensive than those that would be imported, which means transfer of power from poor to the richer guys, sitting probably in England or in the US, but those are the owners of those companies. Thank you.
And that's why I like, now you see why I like economists. I don't know if you can hear that. This is a push for economists. So I think without further ado, we can go to tea now. I think, would you like to introduce where tea will be? Is tea upstairs? Okay, so tea is just outside in the foyer, and as you're in the foyer, please do look at the booths of all the exhibitors who are there. And thank you very much for your time this morning. And thank you to you.
I love Sabrina's enthusiasm, and thank you very much. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the Deputy Minister for Energy, Masubira Mgalu, please. Karibu sana once again, and the Chairman of the TPSF. Karibuni sana, and please join us for tea. We'll do tea for about 20-25 minutes, ladies and gentlemen.